Tonight, we lean back, close our eyes, and let a thought creep in that might make your pillow feel more like a cockpit seat. The moon, that bright coin glued to the night sky. What if it isn't a natural accident at all? What if it's a machine, a construction, a satellite older than human memory, older even than Earth's civilizations? If that's true, then you probably won't survive the implications. But hey, survival is overrated. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moon hangs above you, its face pale, familiar, yet almost too perfect. It's the exact right size, at the exact right distance to blot out the sun in a perfect eclipse. Not good enough, not close enough, perfect. And if it were even slightly different, entire coastlines on Earth would vanish, weather patterns would unravel, and seasons might flicker in and out like a broken light bulb. You're alive because of this coincidence, but coincidences this precise smell less like chance and more like choreography. Scientists love their neat theories. They'll tell you Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago, the moon tagging along soon after. But here's the thing, Venus doesn't have a moon. Mercury doesn't either. Mars has two lumpy space potatoes pretending to be moons. Only Earth has this massive, pristine, perfectly tuned companion. And historians still argue whether it makes sense. Is it luck or design? Think about Apollo 11. You picture Neil Armstrong stepping onto the powdery surface, calling it magnificent desolation. What he didn't say out loud, but astronauts whispered later, was how weirdly shallow some craters looked. Impacts that should have gouged deep scars instead skimmed the surface like pebbles bouncing off a steel plate. Geology? Maybe. Or maybe a crust hiding something stronger beneath. Here's a mainstream fact. The moon drifts away from Earth about 3.8 centimeters a year. Over deep time, that's catastrophic. Hundreds of millions of years ago, it loomed far larger, dragging titanic tides that smashed against coasts and carved life's crucible. Without that tidal stirring, maybe multicellular life would have fizzled out in stagnant soup. Quirky tidbit? Some Zulu legends say the moon was rolled into place by ancient beings, a story so odd it makes skeptics shuffle in their seats. Mythology, sure, but isn't it strange how many cultures whisper of a time before the moon? Historians still argue whether these myths are symbolic metaphors or encoded memories of real events. Either way, you're left with the unease of staring up at a night sky that feels suspiciously rigged. Picture Earth without the moon for a moment. No tides dragging nutrients across the shorelines. No steady tilt keeping seasons in balance. No silver lantern to guide ancient travelers or inspire poets. A darker, wilder, more chaotic planet, maybe too chaotic for you to ever exist on. The moon isn't just a rock. It's the keystone in Earth's arch of life. And keystones don't just fall into place, they're set there. So here you are, lying under the glow of a perfectly placed satellite. You could laugh it off as cosmic luck, or you could wonder whether someone or something hung it there on purpose. You're still lying there, staring upward, when a thought nags you. What if the moon isn't just suspiciously perfect on the outside? What if the inside is stranger still? That idea didn't come from conspiracy forums or campfire ramblings. It started with a dull thud, then an echo, then a vibration that wouldn't die. Picture 1969. Apollo 12 has just left Earth's backyard, and humans, barely comfortable in orbit, decide to treat the moon like a giant tuning fork. They crash the mission's spent rocket stage into its surface. Seismometers planted in the soil start buzzing and keep buzzing. Instead of a muffled thump, the moon reverberates for nearly an hour. Later, Apollo 13's booster crashes harder, and the ringing goes on for over 3 hours. That's not geology as we know it. That's a bell tolling across the void. NASA scientists, caught between awe and embarrassment, admitted it rang like a bell. Official explanation? The moon is bone dry, its fractured crust transmitting vibrations far more efficiently than Earth's waterlogged rocks. Reasonable. But if you've ever banged on a hollow wall in your apartment and heard it sing back longer than expected, you know how unsettling that dryness can feel. And it wasn't just one anomaly. Again and again, moonquakes, triggered by impacts or thermal stresses, rippled through the crust, traveling too far, bouncing as though off inner surfaces. Some waves even hinted at layers that were oddly uniform, as if engineered. Historians still argue whether those signals are proof of a strange internal structure or simply the quirks of a small, dry world. But the unease lingers. Here's your quirky tidbit. Soviet scientists noticed it too. In the 1960s, they pointed out that the moon's overall density is suspiciously low for a body its size, lighter than expected, almost as if hollow or filled with cavities. When the Soviets are scratching their heads at the same puzzle as NASA, you know it's not just fringe noise. Imagine standing in a crater, boots pressing into dust older than humanity, when suddenly the ground hums beneath you, not briefly, but endlessly, like the aftershock of some great bell rung deep below. No air to carry the sound, but you'd feel it in your bones, a vibration whispering that the world beneath your feet isn't solid, it's hollow, or at least pretending to be. Some fringe thinkers leap straight into science fiction. They picture vast caverns beneath the crust, chambers filled with machinery, ancient engines still thrumming quietly. The moon isn't a rock, they argue. It's a shell, a spacecraft, a base. And while mainstream scientists dismiss that leap as fantasy, they can't erase the seismic record. The ringing is real. And now here's the pacing spike. When Apollo 13's booster struck, the moon rang for longer than a Rolling Stones concert. 3 hours. Long enough for controllers on Earth to sit, blinking at their data, wondering whether they were listening to geology or to architecture. Of course, most geologists hold their ground. Dry, fractured rock, they repeat. And maybe that's all it is. But the image of a hollow bell lingers in your head. It's not proof of alien engineering, no, but it's the kind of mystery that keeps even sober scientists glancing sideways at their printouts. And so, you picture the moon not as dead rock, but as something designed to hum, a silent instrument struck by the universe itself. And you can't shake the thought, who built a bell big enough to ring across the heavens? You let the echo fade, but the question it left behind only grows louder. How did the moon ever get there in the first place? If it's natural, it should follow a neat, clean story, one of those tidy explanations scientists love. But the truth? Every theory comes apart at the seams. The first contender was the co-formation theory. Imagine Earth and Moon condensing side by side out of the same solar dust, like twins born in the same cradle. Sounds elegant, right? Except the chemistry doesn't match. The moon is missing heavy metals. Its isotopes eerily resemble Earth's crust instead of its mantle, and its density is far too low. Twins, yes, but one seems hollowed out, stripped, or built. So scientists pivoted to the capture theory. Maybe the moon formed somewhere else, then drifted too close and got snared by Earth's gravity. But capturing a body that large without it shattering or slingshotting away would require conditions so precise they border on impossible. Historians still argue whether any known planet has ever pulled off such a feat. Spoiler, none have. The star of the show became the giant impact hypothesis. A Mars-sized planet, Theia, supposedly slammed into Earth billions of years ago, blasting debris into orbit that coalesced into the moon. It's cinematic, almost operatic, a cosmic collision birthing a satellite. But the chemistry problem rears its head again. If Theia was truly another world, its isotopic fingerprint should be different. Instead, moon rocks are virtually identical to Earth's outer layers, as though they weren't born from a collision, but from Earth itself. Or maybe placed there. And then there's the orbit. The moon's path isn't chaotic like many moons. It's near perfectly circular. Its spin is locked to Earth, so it always shows one face, never turning, never revealing its far side to the naked eye. Too convenient, too steady. A coin glued into the sky, one side painted for you, the other hidden forever. Here's your quirky tidbit. Plutarch, writing in the 1st century, mentions that some Arcadian tribes claimed their ancestors lived before there was a moon. Imagine sitting by firelight, hearing elders speak of nights darker than any you've ever known, when stars ruled the heavens alone. Myths? Probably. But it's hard to ignore how often ancient voices insist the moon wasn't always there. Historians still argue whether these tales are symbolic metaphors or strange echoes of an actual event. Perhaps Earth really did look different once, and the memory got wrapped in story. But stacked alongside the scientific puzzles, it's enough to make your bed feel less steady. So picture it. Earth 4 billion years ago. Molten seas, crashing asteroids, chaos. Out of the fire, a perfect companion appears. Not a lumpy potato like Mars's moons, not a swarm like Jupiter's brood, but a single, symmetrical, too perfect disk. You can squint at the math all day, but at some point it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like an installation. The moon shouldn't exist the way it does, yet there it is. Steady, silent, and maybe just a little too smug about it. You sink deeper into the mattress, but your mind doesn't rest. It drifts backward into the long shadows of history, where people stared up at the same moon and spun their own explanations. They didn't have Apollo rockets or isotope data. What they had were fires, naked eyes, and imaginations sharp enough to carve gods out of the night sky. Picture the Babylonians scratching symbols into clay tablets. They weren't just keeping time, they were building a calendar anchored to the moon's pulse. Months, festivals, harvests, all bent to its rhythm. To them, the moon wasn't passive. It was a regulator, a cosmic gear turning with mechanical precision. When you think about it, that's exactly how you'd describe a machine: steady, repeatable, unrelenting. Now walk to Egypt. Priests in linen robes stand in temple courtyards, watching the moon rise between massive stone pillars. Temples weren't random piles of rock. They were aligned with terrifying accuracy to lunar events. Imagine the labor of dragging stone blocks heavier than tanks into alignment because the moon told you to. Historians still argue whether these alignments were deliberate astronomical feats or just happy accidents, but the precision makes the accident explanation feel flimsy. Here's your quirky tidbit. The ancient Greeks had a word, proselenes, those before the moon. Entire tribes claimed descent from people who lived when the sky had no lunar glow. Aristotle himself mentions it, as though it were just another detail in humanity's backstory. Casual, matter of fact, as though it were memory, not myth. And the Maya? They folded lunar cycles into calendars so intricate that even modern computers nod in respect. Their myths tied the moon to duality, life and death, fertility and famine. For them, the moon was not inert. It was active, deliberate, alive in its timing. Across the ocean, the Chinese saw a rabbit pounding elixirs on its glowing surface, while Africans told of brothers rolling the moon into place. Different continents, different cultures, same obsession. Historians still argue whether all this lunar devotion is just the human brain searching for patterns. Maybe everyone just loves a good nightlight. Or maybe, deep down, ancient people noticed what you're noticing now. The moon doesn't behave like a rock. It behaves like a clock, a regulator, a presence. And then there's Stonehenge. Those weathered pillars don't just track the sun. They mark lunar standstills, the extreme points of the moon's 18.6-year cycle. That's not superstition. That's engineering. Imagine the effort, centuries of labor, all to sync with a glowing disk in the sky. What did they know or suspect that made the moon worth that much trouble? You pull the blanket up around you and imagine being one of those ancient stargazers. No electric lights, no distractions, just a sky so full of stars it looks like spilled salt. And there, the moon, huge, pale, unblinking. Unlike any other object in the heavens, it never reveals its hidden side. Wouldn't you start to think someone fixed it that way? The ancients certainly did. To them, the moon was not scenery. It was divine, mechanical, suspicious. And in their stories, you can hear the first echoes of a question you're still asking tonight. Who or what put that thing there? Your mind drifts now from ancient campfires to the darker theories whispered on late-night radio, the hollow moon hypothesis. A phrase that sounds absurd until you start unpacking the evidence, and then it stops feeling so easy to laugh off. It began with Apollo. Remember that bell-like ringing? Mainstream geologists said it was just dry rock transmitting vibrations. But once that phrase "rang like a bell" hit the newspapers, the hollow moon idea had fuel. What if the moon isn't solid? What if that gray dust and cratered crust are just a shell? In 1970, two Soviet scientists, Mikhail Vosin and Alexander Sherbakov, published a bold paper suggesting exactly that. Their theory, the moon could be a hollow planetoid, constructed by unknown intelligences. Its outer shell armored with metals, its interior vast and cavernous. They weren't obscure cranks. They worked at respected institutions. And their article hit like a seismic wave of its own. Imagine reading that in Cold War Moscow, realizing your closest cosmic neighbor might be less a world and more a machine parked in orbit. Now, mainstream science points to natural explanations. Shallow craters? Maybe the crust is stronger in places. Odd mass concentrations, mascons beneath the surface? Perhaps just clumps of dense rock from ancient impacts. But those mascons tugged so strongly on Apollo spacecraft that engineers had to adjust orbits mid-flight. Historians still argue whether mascons are purely natural or if something deliberate is hiding under the crust. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some fringe researchers claim the crust behaves like reinforced plating. Impacts that should have gouged kilometers deep only skimmed the surface. To them, it looks like a car bumper, built to take hits, protect what's underneath. If you were designing a satellite to survive billions of years in space, wouldn't you armor it the same way? Now picture yourself walking on that surface. The regolith crunches under your boots, fine as powder. Beneath you, maybe dozens of meters down, lies not just bedrock, but insulation. And further below, cavernous halls, maybe machinery humming faintly, maybe nothing but silence. The thought makes your chest tighten. If you were inside, you might not even know you were inside. That's how seamless a shell can be. Historians still argue whether hollow is too strong a word. Some prefer porous. Others think the moon's unusual density could come from its odd birth. But the debate itself is the point. Rocks don't usually inspire heated conferences. Machines do. And here's your pacing spike. When Apollo 13's booster slammed into the moon and it rang for 3 hours, one NASA scientist muttered it behaved as if it had gigantic hydraulic dampers inside. Hydraulic dampers? That's not a word you use for a rock. It's a word for engineering. Of course, the rational side of you whispers, maybe it's still just weird geology. But another part, the one staring upward right now, can't help but imagine that the moon's crust is nothing more than a disguise. That glowing orb, always watching, might be less a world and more a hollow shell, a relic of builders older than memory. And suddenly, bedtime feels a little less cozy. The hollow moon idea might sound like late-night paranoia, but then you remember, people have been spotting weirdness up there for centuries. Long before Apollo, long before telescopes sharpened, the moon was already misbehaving for anyone who cared to look. Take the so-called transient lunar phenomena. Reports go back to the 1600s. Brief flashes of light, strange mists, glowing spots that blinked across the lunar face. Sometimes red, sometimes blue, sometimes dazzlingly white. Even NASA kept a catalog of them, hundreds of events logged across centuries. Official explanations vary: meteor impacts, outgassing, or the all-purpose shrug of optical illusion. But if you're the one staring through the eyepiece when the moon flickers at you like a cosmic lighthouse, good luck writing it off as eye strain. Even William Herschel, the man who discovered Uranus, reported seeing odd lights on the moon. He thought they might be volcanic eruptions. The trouble is, the moon is supposed to be geologically dead. Historians still argue whether Herschel was duped by tricks of the atmosphere or if he really caught the moon flashing back at him. And it isn't just lights. There have been whispers of structures. In the 1950s, amateur astronomers swore they saw what looked like a bridge stretching across part of Mare Crisium, a mile-long arc that appeared, then vanished. NASA brushed it off as shadows. Enthusiasts still call it the Lunar Bridge. Then's the Shard, a spindly spire that appeared in a 1968 lunar orbiter photo, jutting miles into space like some alien antenna. Officially, a photographic glitch. Unofficially, one of the most argued over smudges in history. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 1992, observers saw a glowing cloud near Aristarchus crater, like fog on an airless world. Instruments even detected radon gas venting from the surface. Outgassing is a possibility, sure, but the fact that the brightest crater on the moon also happens to be one of its most active keeps the mystery alive. If you believe the fringe angle, that glow was more like a leak, a vent from something hidden inside.
Apollo astronauts added fuel to the fire. Buzz Aldrin spoke of strange objects trailing Apollo 11 en route. Apollo 16's crew reported flashes outside their windows. NASA said cosmic rays hitting their retinas could cause phantom sparks. Reasonable, but unnerving if you're alone in a tin can halfway to the moon with lights strobing in your vision. Historians still argue whether these anomalies are mere artifacts of observation or glimpses of real ongoing activity. But if the moon is truly just a dead rock, it's doing a suspiciously bad job at playing dead. So picture yourself lying in the Aristarchus region, surrounded by desolate silence. The dust is gray, the sky black, when suddenly a glow. Not bright, but steady. A faint mist curling where no mist should be. You step closer. The glow flickers, pulses, then fades, leaving you with nothing but your own rapid breathing. Was it geology, or was it a light switch, briefly flicked, then shut off again? The moon has been winking at us for centuries. Lights, shadows, shapes, gases, maybe illusions, maybe not. But the pattern repeats often enough that one truth emerges. Whatever the moon is, it doesn't like being boring. You roll onto your side, thinking, if the moon is just rock, why does it feel like it's running a show? It doesn't only shine, it scripts the stage directions of Earth itself. Every wave, every tide, every rhythm of life is pulled by that steady tug. It's as though someone installed a cosmic metronome to keep the planet's heartbeat steady. Start with tides. Twice a day, the moon drags oceans back and forth, stirring nutrients, keeping ecosystems alive. Without that pull, coastal zones, the cradles where life first crawled ashore, might have stayed barren. In fact, some biologists argue that tidal pools, stirred endlessly by the moon's gravity, gave early organisms the push they needed to evolve lungs, legs, and ambition. Without the moon, maybe you're still goo. Fun thought, you owe your existence to cosmic tug-of-war. And then there's Earth's tilt. Planets wobble. Just ask Mars, whose tilt swings wildly over eons, turning its climate into chaos. Earth, though, stable, steady, a smooth 23.5 degrees. Why? The moon's gravitational hand, acting like a gyroscope. Historians still argue whether complex civilizations could have even emerged without that stability. Imagine growing crops while your planet tips unpredictably. Good luck inventing calendars, let alone Netflix. Here's your QWERTY tidbit. Researchers discovered coral fossils recording tidal cycles from 400 million years ago. Back then, days were only 22 hours long because the moon was closer, tugging harder. As it drifts away, days lengthen. So yes, your weekend lie-in is literally brought to you by lunar recession, a cosmic snooze button slowly ticking. The moon also guards against asteroids. Its mass shields Earth, drawing in or deflecting some of the debris that would otherwise smash into your backyard. Not perfect, ask the dinosaurs, but enough that it's been called Earth's cosmic bodyguard. And again, that's not how you'd describe a random rock. That's a role, a job. And don't forget the spectacle, eclipses. The sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, but also 400 times farther away. That perfect ratio makes eclipses possible, aligning just so, letting the moon blot the sun with surgical precision. Coincidence or choreography?
Historians still argue whether life could have flourished without the moon's influence. Some say yes, life always finds a way. Others insist the moon's presence was the deciding factor, the difference between chaos and stability, between endless soup and Shakespeare. Either way, the moon didn't just decorate the sky, it programmed Earth's destiny. So you lie there, realizing you're not just staring at scenery, you're staring at the invisible conductor of every tide you've ever swum in, every harvest ever grown, every breath drawn by creatures who survived long enough to make you. The moon isn't passive, it's participatory. It's shaping you, whether you admit it or not. And if it's shaping you this much, doesn't it feel a little intentional?
The longer you stare at the moon, the stranger its geometry becomes. It isn't just that it tugs at oceans or steadies Earth's tilt, it's the eerie way it seems fine-tuned. You'd almost call it smug if rocks could smirk. Start with size. The moon is about 1/4 of Earth's diameter, absurdly large for a moon. Most moons in the solar system are tiny compared to their planets. Mars has Phobos and Deimos, little more than space pebbles. Jupiter has dozens of moons, sure, but they're dwarfed by the giant's bulk. Only Earth's companion is this oversized, this proportionally odd. Historians still argue whether this sheer scale is just a fluke or something more. Then there's distance. Right now, the moon sits about 384,000 kilometers away. Just far enough, just big enough to cover the sun perfectly during a solar eclipse. Not partially, not sloppily, perfectly. The odds of that are so bizarre that some astronomers shake their heads and call it the grandest coincidence in the cosmos. Coincidence or measurement? Here's your quirky tidbit. During a 1999 conference, astrophysicist Erwin Shapiro quipped, "The best place to hide a spaceship would be on the moon." He wasn't being literal, but the idea stuck. Because when you look at the moon's numbers, its symmetry, its neat ratios, it feels less like nature and more like someone hiding in plain sight. Consider this. The moon's orbit is nearly circular, eccentric by only about 5%. That's freakishly smooth compared to most moons, whose orbits wobble like shopping carts with broken wheels. A circle, precise and calm, locked tidally so one face forever stares at Earth. Always watching, always presenting the same mask. And the far side? Rugged, scarred, completely different from the near side. The contrast is so stark that geologists joke the two hemispheres look like they belong to different worlds. One side smooth, almost inviting, the other brutal and jagged. If you were designing a satellite to show one polished face while hiding its rougher mechanics, that's exactly how you'd build it. Historians still argue whether this duality can be explained by early tidal heating, or if it hints at something unnatural. But either way, you can't escape the unease. The moon behaves too neatly, like a gear machined for a specific purpose. And here's the pacing spike. During eclipses, when the moon slides between Earth and Sun, its fit is so exact that astronomers can measure the sun's corona, glimpse solar flares, and even test Einstein's theories. Those discoveries, those breakthroughs, all happened because of that 1 in a billion alignment. It's as if the moon not only watches you, but also hands you clues about the universe, nudging your science forward, like a teacher leaving hints on the blackboard. So you lie back, and the thought creeps in. Maybe the moon isn't just a companion. Maybe it's a setup, a riddle with geometry as its punchline. The more you crunch the numbers, the harder it is to believe it's random. The moon is perfect, too perfect. And perfection in nature always makes you suspicious.
You can't help but wonder, if the moon is too perfect, too strange, too conveniently placed, then maybe someone's been meddling. And this is where the rabbit hole widens, because whispers of alien involvement have hovered over the moon for decades, long before memes and sci-fi channels gave them an afterlife. Let's start with Apollo. The astronauts were professionals, trained to keep their cool, but even they let slip hints that something wasn't ordinary. Buzz Aldrin once admitted Apollo 11 saw something pacing them on the way over. Officially, NASA called it a detached panel from the rocket. Unofficially, it was described as glowing, moving intelligently. Imagine being strapped in a tin can halfway to the moon and realizing you might not be alone. Later missions brought their own stories. Apollo 15's crew reported mysterious flashes on the surface. Apollo 16 filmed odd lights darting across the lunar horizon. These weren't campfire myths. These were test pilots with thousands of logged flight hours. Yet their accounts were tucked into mission transcripts with clinical wording, as if burying the strangeness under paperwork. Historians still argue whether NASA deliberately downplayed such reports or whether it really was all cosmic rays tickling their retinas. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 1973, a former NASA contractor, Ken Johnston, claimed the agency had photos of artificial structures on the moon, towers, domes, even ruins, that were quietly classified. Official stance? Denial. But the rumor refused to die, feeding an entire subculture convinced the moon isn't empty but occupied. And it's not just modern accounts. Ancient Chinese legends describe heavenly beings descending to the moon, where they built palaces of jade. The Zulu spoke of sky watchers who rolled the moon into place. These stories sound poetic, sure, but when you line them up with modern UFO claims, they take on an eerie consistency. The moon isn't just there, it's inhabited, or at least managed. And then there's the spaceship moon theory, bold, ridiculous, yet strangely persistent. It suggests the moon is an engineered vessel, parked in orbit like a cosmic outpost. Proponents point to its precise orbit, its density quirks, its odd ringing, and say this isn't nature, it's engineering. The moon as a derelict ship, camouflaged in dust. Historians still argue whether these theories should be taken as folklore, psychology, or suppressed data. Mainstream scientists roll their eyes, but even they can't erase the persistent drumbeat of anomalies, lights, shadows, rumors, whispers. Now here's your pacing spike. In 1968, before Apollo 11, NASA released lunar orbiter images showing what looked like a mile-high spire. Some swore it resembled an antenna. NASA said, artifact, photographic error. But the photo still circulates today, grainy, uncanny, fueling late-night debates. So here's the thought that keeps you awake. If the moon is artificial, then its builders might not be gone. They could be waiting, watching, hidden on the far side where no naked eye has ever looked. Maybe those flashes, those odd lights, aren't geology at all. Maybe they're porch lights, flickering just long enough for you to notice, then vanishing again. And if that's true, then every time you look up at the moon, it's not just a rock, it's an eye that blinks back. Your eyelids grow heavier, but your thoughts keep racing. If someone, or something, really did leave fingerprints on the moon, then surely we'd see them in the evidence Apollo dragged back home. Rocks, soil, seismic readings, artifacts. And that's where the whispers turn into a strange mix of science and rumor. Start with the rocks. Apollo brought back 842 pounds of lunar material, carefully bagged and catalogued. Mainstream analysis says basalt, anorthosite, breccias, volcanic origins, battered by impacts. Nothing to see here. But then geochemists noticed something odd. The oxygen isotopes in moon rocks are virtually identical to Earth's. Too identical. Normally, each planetary body carries its own isotopic signature. The moon's? A carbon copy of Earth's crust. That shouldn't happen if it formed elsewhere, or even if it formed from a giant collision. Unless, of course, someone wanted to camouflage the moon so it blended in. And the age? Some lunar rocks dated older than any found on Earth, up to 4.6 billion years. Older than the oldest continents, older than the oceans, older even than Earth's oldest known rocks. That means the moon, at least in part, carries a memory Earth itself has already lost. Historians still argue whether this proves the moon is primordial or whether it's been built using materials scavenged from ancient cosmic stockpiles. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Apollo samples contained tiny glass beads formed at extreme heat that held traces of water. For decades, NASA said the moon was bone dry. Later, evidence showed water hidden deep in those beads, like secrets locked in a vault. If it's geology, fine. If not, it's almost like someone baked the water into the rock deliberately. And then there's the rumor mill. Ken Johnston, the whistleblower who claimed NASA suppressed evidence, insisted some samples contained anomalous objects, later destroyed or hidden. Officially, that's dismissed as nonsense. Unofficially, it's one of those stories that never quite dies because it scratches the itch of what-ifs too perfectly. Astronauts themselves hinted at strangeness. Al Worden from Apollo 15 mused decades later that human history might be all wrong, that ancient civilizations, or something older, could have had a hand in the moon. He didn't drop equations, he dropped a gut feeling, shaped by staring at a place that seemed far too precise. Historians still argue whether these statements are just philosophical musings or genuine confessions, but the unease clings. Now for the pacing spike. In 2009, India's Chandrayaan-1 probe mapped elements across the lunar surface and found high concentrations of titanium and uranium in odd places. Titanium is prized in aerospace engineering, light, strong, resilient. The moon has it in suspiciously large amounts, sometimes clustered as though arranged. Coincidence or signature of construction? So imagine yourself holding one of those moon rocks. Cold, jagged, older than your species. It looks ordinary, but its isotopes whisper of camouflage. Its minerals hint at design. Its age hums of eons lost. Is it geology or technology disguised as geology? And then there's the rumor mill. Ken Johnston, the whistleblower who claimed NASA suppressed evidence, insisted some samples contained anomalous objects, later destroyed or hidden. Officially, that's dismissed as nonsense. Unofficially, it's one of those stories that never quite dies because it scratches the itch of what-ifs too perfectly. Astronauts themselves hinted at strangeness. Al Worden from Apollo 15 mused decades later that human history might be all wrong, that ancient civilizations, or something older, could have had a hand in the moon. He didn't drop equations, he dropped a gut feeling, shaped by staring at a place that seemed far too precise. Historians still argue whether these statements are just philosophical musings or genuine confessions, but the unease clings. Now for the pacing spike. In 2009, India's Chandrayaan-1 probe mapped elements across the lunar surface and found high concentrations of titanium and uranium in odd places. Titanium is prized in aerospace engineering, light, strong, resilient. The Moon has it in suspiciously large amounts, sometimes clustered as though arranged. Coincidence or signature of construction? So imagine yourself holding one of those moon rocks. Cold, jagged, older than your species. It looks ordinary, but its isotopes whisper of camouflage. Its minerals hint at design. Its age hums of eons lost. Is it geology or technology disguised as geology? You place it back in its case. It sits there, mute, while your mind won't stop asking, did Apollo bring home evidence not of a world, but of a workshop?
You can almost hear it now. The quiet voices in corridors at NASA, the off-the-record remarks, the things never typed into mission transcripts. If the Moon really is more than a rock, maybe some people already know it. And maybe they've been careful not to tell you. Let's rewind to Apollo. The official line is triumph, flags, and moonwalks, but tucked into the background are strange silences, radio blackouts, gaps in recordings, claims, always anecdotal, that astronauts reported things off-script. Conspiracy? Maybe, but it's the kind of silence that begs to be filled. Take Apollo 11. After landing, there's a 2-minute gap in communication with mission control. Fringe theorists love to say Armstrong reported structures near the crater rim, watching us. NASA says the gap was just routine channel switching. Historians still argue whether this is pure myth or a kernel of truth muffled by bureaucracy. But once an idea like that lands, it never really dies. And then there's the astronauts' body language. You've seen the interviews, brave men, test pilots, yet some of them look oddly subdued when talking about their time on the Moon, like they saw something they couldn't quite process or couldn't quite share. Buzz Aldrin once admitted he saw a strange object on the way over before backtracking under pressure. Al Worden later hinted humanity's history might be tangled up with beings out there. Words chosen carefully, words that feel more like breadcrumbs than confession. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, NASA quietly classified some Apollo seismic data. The explanation was benign: national security, Cold War context, concerns about nuclear test detection overlap. Still, the idea that data about the Moon, your closest neighbor, was locked away only fuels suspicion. If there was nothing odd, why hide it? The secrecy doesn't stop with Apollo. In 2009, when NASA deliberately crashed the Else-Cross probe into a lunar crater to search for water, some claimed the plume was larger than expected, sparking chatter about hollow chambers. Official analysis said nothing unusual, but the footage itself, bright, startling, kept conspiracy forums buzzing for years. Historians still argue whether NASA suppresses anomalies out of genuine caution, avoiding public panic, or whether they're concealing truths about a moon that isn't what it seems. Both explanations fit, which is why the debate lingers. And then there's the Soviets. In the 1960s, Soviet scientists openly speculated about artificial origins. Their space program tracked every Apollo mission. What did they see in their data? What did their probes record? Officially, they moved on. Unofficially, some of their journals still contain eyebrow-raising phrases like spaceship of unknown origin. Now the pacing spike. Even today, high-resolution images from modern probes occasionally show oddities, angular shadows, geometric-looking patterns. NASA explains them as natural formations, and maybe they are. But once you've been told the moon could be a machine, your brain refuses to stop seeing screws in every rock. So you lie there, staring upward, and wonder, maybe the silence, the secrecy, isn't about protecting national pride. Maybe it's about protecting you. Because if the truth leaked, if the moon isn't a world but a construct, you'd have to rewrite not just textbooks, but the story of what it means to be human. And maybe, just maybe, you're not ready for that bedtime story.
The silence of official agencies leaves you restless, so your mind drifts into darker waters. The myths and modern fringe theories that paint the moon not as guardian, but as manipulator. If it's artificial, then maybe it isn't neutral. Maybe it's here for a reason, and not necessarily one you'd like. Some traditions hinted at this long before modern conspiracies. Remember the Zulu legends? They tell of two brothers who rolled the moon into the sky, hollowing it out and steering it into orbit. According to their stories, that moment unleashed chaos on Earth. Storms, floods, disruptions that reshaped life itself. Not exactly a bedtime lullaby. Fast forward to modern thinkers. David Icke, the infamous conspiracy figure, has called the moon a broadcasting satellite, a machine designed to manipulate human perception. Outlandish? Yes, but it's a chilling thought. What if the moon isn't just stabilizing tides, but stabilizing minds? Always showing one face, always beaming unseen influences. Historians still argue whether these modern interpretations are just paranoia dressed as science fiction, or if they carry faint echoes of older suspicions. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers claim sleep cycles are subtly affected by lunar phases, even in the absence of moonlight. Experiments showed people sleeping less deeply during the full moon, despite being shielded from its light. Coincidence? Or is something else tugging on you besides gravity? And then there are the UFO claims. Dozens of reports place strange craft rising from the moon's surface, darting across space, then returning. Amateur astronomers in the 1960s swore they saw formations of lights moving in coordinated patterns across the lunar horizon. NASA chalked it up to imagination or atmospheric distortion. But once you've seen one fleet shimmer and vanish, good luck convincing yourself it was all in your head. Historians still argue whether these stories are simple human pattern-seeking or hints of activity. But if the moon is a station, an ark, or a fortress, then the idea of vehicles coming and going fits all too neatly. Now the pacing spike. In 1979, the Science Channel aired interviews with scientists speculating that the moon's density anomalies could suggest vast hollow regions. One quipped, "It's easier to believe it's artificial than to swallow all these inconsistencies." That was broadcast on television, not whispered in a basement. Imagine hearing that over dinner, then stepping outside and realizing the glowing orb overhead might be a machine. You close your eyes and wonder, what if the moon isn't just watching? What it's shaping, nudging? Maybe your history, your evolution, even your sleep are part of a program written long before you existed. It's one thing to live under a satellite. It's another to suspect you're living under surveillance.
The more you unravel the moon's mysteries, the harder it becomes to ignore one final possibility. Maybe the moon wasn't just parked here for Earth's benefit. It might have been built before Earth was ready for you. A relic from an age predating humanity, maybe even predating human ancestors. Consider this. The moon's rocks, some of them, are older than Earth's oldest known crust. That alone hints it could be a visitor from an earlier epoch of the solar system. If it's a machine, it might be billions of years older than your species, an artifact left behind when life was still microscopic ooze. Historians still argue whether that age difference is meaningful or just an artifact of how we measure isotopes. But if the moon predates complex life, then it wasn't built for you, it was waiting for you. Here's your quirky tidbit. In 1966, Soviet astronomer Yosef Shklovsky suggested Mars's moon Phobos might be hollow and possibly artificial. He later softened the claim, but the spark lit imaginations. If one moon could be a construct, why not ours? Fringe thinkers took his musings and ran straight into speculation. The moon might be an ark, a vault, or a marker planted before humans ever emerged. And think about timing. Homo sapiens have been around for roughly 300,000 years, a blank compared to the moon's 4.5 billion. If the moon is artificial, then it's been in place for an absurdly long time, silently orbiting, watching Earth crawl from single cells to cities. If it has a purpose, it's a long game, one running so patiently that your entire species barely counts as an experiment still in progress. Now here's your pacing spike. What if the moon is less a satellite and more a message? An ancient orbiting library left behind for whoever finally looks closely enough. Those isotope puzzles, those geometric alignments, those impossible coincidences. What if they're not glitches, but clues, breadcrumbs scattered across billions of years, waiting for eyes clever enough to notice? Maybe the moon itself is the message. Of course, the skeptic in you pipes up, maybe this is just humanity's vanity projecting meaning onto stone. But that vanity can't erase the fact that the moon behaves unlike any other known satellite. It's outsized, fine-tuned, stabilizing, and ancient. It is either the universe's luckiest accident or the oldest construction project you've ever lived under. And then you let the thought really settle. If the moon is older than humans, maybe even older than Earth civilizations, then it belongs to someone else. Not to you, not to humanity, not even to Earth. You're the tenants living under a roof someone else installed. The landlord just never showed up again. Or maybe they're still out there, waiting for rent.
You've circled the same haunting question again and again. If the moon isn't natural, then who or what built it, and why? This is the part of the journey where your brain drifts past the rocks, the isotopes, the orbits, and into the realm of motive. A machine means a maker, and a maker means intention. The most popular guess is extraterrestrials, not little green men with antennae, but civilizations so advanced they could move planets like furniture. Think about it. If you had technology millions of years ahead of Earth's, nudging a satellite into orbit would be child's play. Ancient cultures even framed this possibility in their myths. The Greeks spoke of Selene as a divine guardian who placed the moon in the sky. The Zulu spoke of beings who rolled it into place. Across continents, the story repeats. The moon was given, not born. But here's a darker take. What if it wasn't given as a gift, but imposed as a cage? Some theorists suggest the moon is a surveillance station, a one-eyed warden fixed on Earth, always facing the same way, always watching. Its tidally locked gaze has never blinked for billions of years. Historians still argue whether ancient people truly saw it this way, but the metaphor writes itself, a celestial security camera. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, a Soviet scientist speculated, half joking, half not, that the moon could be a cosmic ark, a storage unit for genetic material, knowledge, or even souls, tucked safely above Earth until it was time to return. Imagine lying under the sky, knowing there's a vault up there, older than your pyramids, older than your species, waiting like a locked attic no one dares open. And then, the human option. What if the moon wasn't built by aliens at all, but by us? Or by humans so ancient they've been forgotten? A lost civilization that reached the stars long before recorded history, collapsing and leaving only this monument behind. Atlantis, but in orbit. Ridiculous? Maybe. But when you see coral fossils proving tides were different hundreds of millions of years ago, when you see myths about a time before the moon, the question doesn't feel as absurd. Now for the pacing spike. What if the builders aren't gone? What if they're still inside it? Hollow moon theorists imagine vast caverns housing machinery, libraries, even control rooms. Reports of transient lunar phenomena, those mysterious flashes, could be signals, beacons, or windows cracking open for just a moment. If that's true, then the moon isn't abandoned, it's occupied, and you've been staring at someone else's home this whole time. Of course, the skeptic in you smirks. Maybe all this is human insecurity projected onto the sky. We see design because we fear randomness. But the more you sit with it, the harder it is to dismiss. The moon isn't just a backdrop, it's a player, a keystone, a riddle too carefully written to be brushed off as coincidence. So you let the thoughts settle in your chest. The moon could be a cradle, it could be a cage, it could be a relic, a machine, or a monument. Whatever it isn't just scenery, it's a story, one you're living under every night, whether you want to or not. The questions have piled up like shadows in the corner of your room, and now you lie beneath the moon with a single thought echoing. Maybe this whole thing, the tides, the myths, the bell-like ringing, the strange lights, was never meant to be solved. Maybe it was meant to keep you wondering. Because if the moon is artificial, then it's more than geology, it's destiny. Every shoreline that nurtured life, every stable season that allowed crops, every ancient gaze lifted skyward, all of it shaped by this one silent companion. You exist because of it. That alone makes the moon feel less like background scenery and more like a deliberate actor in your story. The evidence stacks oddly. Rocks older than Earth, isotopes identical to your crust, orbits impossibly precise, a face that never turns away. The mainstream explanations struggle to smooth those edges, and so the whispers creep in. Maybe it's a construct, maybe a relic, maybe a machine still humming quietly. Historians still argue whether these debates are valuable science or just human imagination clinging to mystery. But the argument itself proves the moon isn't finished with you. Here's your quirky tidbit. When Apollo 12 astronauts set up seismic instruments, they also placed reflectors on the lunar surface. To this day, scientists fire lasers at those reflectors and measure the moon's distance to the centimeter. Think about that. Every time a green beam bounces back, you're essentially pinging the moon like radar. And it pings back, like a machine designed to answer. Now for the pacing spike. Imagine one night, those lasers stop bouncing back. No reflection, no reply, silence. What would that mean? That the panels were moved, covered, or that someone, something, decided to stop cooperating? The thought alone makes your skin prickle.
Still, the moon remains, watching, unblinking. A riddle so enormous you fall asleep beneath it without ever cracking its code. And maybe that's the point. Not to solve it, but to feel it. To know your world is shaped by a mystery still unsolved, still whispering down at you in pale light. And so, as your thoughts slow and your breathing steadies, you let the moon be what it has always been, a guide, a guardian, a question mark dangling in the sky.
Take a deep breath now, long and slow, and let it out even slower. The moon still shines above you, steady and quiet, indifferent to the weight of your questions. Whatever it is, rock, machine, arc, or riddle, it has held its orbit through billions of years, through extinctions and rebirths, through every story humanity has ever told. That stability, that silence, is its gift. You no longer need to tug at the questions. Let them drift the way tides drift under lunar gravity. Let them wash in, then slip away. The moon isn't asking to be solved tonight. It's asking only to be seen, to be felt, to be trusted as the steady glow it has always been. Your body softens as you picture its surface. Not the harsh craters or the anomalies, but the smooth, pale glow you've always known. A lantern in the dark, a compass in the sky. It doesn't matter whether it was carved by gods, aliens, or chaos. It is here, and it is enough. Breathe again. Imagine your lungs sinking with the tides. In, the ocean swells. Out, the ocean falls. You're part of that rhythm, linked by invisible threads to the moon itself. The same pull that shapes seas is shaping you, cradling you toward sleep. Thoughts grow slower. Sentences stretch longer, softer. The weight of speculation fades, replaced by a stillness as ancient as the light spilling across your pillow. Close your eyes. Let the last image linger. Not a machine, not a riddle, but a quiet friend, silver and patient, standing guard above your dreams. The moon is there, you are here, and tonight, that is all you need. Sweet dreams.